Broadcasting live and worldwide. Here's Brody Brazil.
Well, I suppose I'm starting the podcast like this, mostly for shock value, by just saying it out loud. That Joe Thornton is no longer part of the San Jose Sharks, and Joe Thornton is now a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Man, it really catches your ear if you're a longtime fan of Team Teal. This news that came out today on Friday, October 16th, 2020, it was unsurprising, I think, at least understanding the situation and the circumstances. Joe had been on a series of one-year deals in San Jose, and who really knows what the next NHL season is even going to look or feel like or be like. But even though we knew this was a certain possibility, it was still jolting all at the same time when it became official earlier this afternoon. And that's kind of one of the big points I want to make here, 19 in total. So hang with me here. But number 2 is this. It's officially the end of an era. And that's not to discredit Patrick Marleau, because he's obviously been around just as long, well, longer, I guess you could say, being drafted originally by the Sharks in 97, right behind Jumbo. It's not to also take away from any of the talented Sharks teams that preceded Joe in 2005, teams that went to the Western Final. But it's just that when the Sharks added Joe Thornton, that's truly when they became perennial contenders. Maybe outsiders, maybe East Coasters, maybe Canadians took the Sharks franchise a lot more seriously once they had Joe Thornton to go along with Patrick Marleau and a complement of other great players. Point number 3 I want to make is that it's too bad. It's very unfortunate that, understanding we might have seen Joe's last game as a Shark. And I guess watching Patrick Marleau come back for a third tour of duty, it kind of does plant the seed in the back of your mind like anything is possible. I do realize Joe would be 42 for next season. He did sign a one-year deal in Toronto, but the odds of that just do not seem tremendously great. So if this was it, it's really too bad that there was not a formal goodbye or a countdown or a tangible expectation that we knew we would be watching the final games for Joe Thornton in San Jose. But in all honesty, looking at it from Joe's perspective, he probably didn't want any of that at all anyways. Point number 4 here, I really do think there's 2 ways to look at Joe Thornton's career in San Jose. And part of it is just the statistics and the milestones and the leaderboards that he's all a part of. I mean, assists, points, games played. It's absolutely ridiculous. Joe is basically a point-per-game player through more than 1,200 games of his career. That is bonkers to think about that success, that durability, and that endurance. But yeah, we could gloat about all the stats and, like I said, where he stands among all the NHL greats over time. But I also think it's important to really recognize the cultural part, how he changed and how he set a tone inside San Jose's dressing room. And that happened before he was named captain. That happened while he was captain. And I do want to get into this later. It continued even well after he was no longer the wearer of the C in San Jose. So I know a lot of people are going to measure Joe's time with the Sharks from the statistical point, and it is impressive, but if you were around it, I think you also realize the culture that he really helped create and procure in San Jose. Point number 5 here is that Joe going to Toronto, and I guess I didn't really get into this yet, it makes a lot of sense for a couple different reasons. Point number 5 is this: Toronto is closer to Joe's parents. It's also closer to Joe's farm, where he spends some time in the summer. And all of that is easy to understand and see, especially during times like these. If you have the opportunity to have your family, your mom and dad, who they are frequent visitors to San Jose every year, they go to road trips. I imagine a large part of this, when Joe eventually does get the opportunity to speak about it, is that he's doing this for, he wants to contend, but he's doing it for family reasons. And I totally understand that. It's very special. Point number 6 is also considering that Joe going to Toronto is part of realizing that the 2021 NHL season, it's going to be either shortened or condensed, or likely shortened and condensed. And the thought would be that if this were normal circumstances, hey, just come right back to San Jose, start your season there, see how it goes. And if you're not a contender, maybe you're a trade candidate, you can see how the teams are playing out. You can see a likely candidate, a good situation for you, something the Sharks can get in return. I mean, it's really what Patrick Marleau was able to go through last year. And quite honestly, it was probably what Joe was hoping to have last year. It just did not work out. So with this shortened season, and obviously playing through a pandemic, potentially, this is just so much easier for Joe to sign with and stay with one team, as opposed to having to consider a move, halfway through the crazy condensed year that's about to be. Point number 7, Joe has always been in exceptional physical condition. And how many athletes are even able to play until they're, 35? And here he is at 41, one of the best conditioned, one of the best trained. You would never know his age if it wasn't printed in a biography. Honestly, well, I guess the gray beard does give a hint of that away too. But I think it's amazing the endurance that he and Patrick Marleau have been able to showcase over the years. And they play different games, they play different styles. But Joe Thornton, to be as healthy as he has been, and also to fight through some of the injuries, which I'll get to later on here, 2 major knee injuries late in his career. Both of these could have been the absolute very end. And they turned out not to be. And so I talk about, I guess, conditioning a lot, but also Joe's commitment to recovery and rehabilitation. It's just it's been impressive. A lot of great players in his situation would have hung up the skates, even after one knee injury. He had him on both knees, and he came back both times. All right, point number 8 here. How many star players do you see coming up in 2020 that are of the pass first mentality? Now, I know to a certain extent that might have frustrated Sharks fans over the years. You're such a good passer, but man, sometimes shoot the puck. You're very capable of it, and you're very good at it when you do. But that's just Joe Thornton, right? And that's what made him special. Knowing that was his number one skill set on the ice, his vision, his hands, his ability to get you the puck. For some reason, especially if you're a right-handed shot, he loved setting up those type of teammates and line mates. But yeah, that's the point. How many young stars coming up will ever be like Joe Thornton of the pass first mentality? You tell me. Point number 10, on a lighter note. Actually, no, I'm at 9. Sorry. Point 9. The shirtless interviews. I just wanted to share this about Joe's character. I know you guys know it from watching him on television after games all the years. It's more than a running joke. I mean, it's a long time thing that he just prefers not to have a shirt on for most, if not all, the interviews he does. It's just kind of his personality. Obviously, you're very well aware, too, of the ESPN The Body photo shoot he did with Brent Burns a couple years back. So Joe and the Buff, it's his preference. I'll just leave it at that. Now we get to number 10 here. And how about all of the little instigating tricks that Joe pulled out of his toolbox over the years? Like, for example, was it a playoff series where he put the finger in, was it Henrik Sedin's face? I think they were both talking as captains. He was, and I think Henrik was over there talking to the official too. And Daniel was right there too. That's why I always get confused. But Joe kept pointing like at those guys. But when he was pointing at those guys, he literally had his index finger square on the nose of Henrik Sedin. And just Henrik kept slapping his hand away. It was just, it's amazing little tricks of the trade like that. You know, the stuff that really gets under your opponent's skin. That's not, against the culture, against the rules. It's not injuring anybody, but he just really knew how to get to opponents. And I would also say even in more recent times, there was that game in Carolina where Peter Mrazek, the Canes goalie, just took an absolute whack at Joe. He slashed him down low by the knees. Now, I think Joe had been jousting with him before that, so I'm not going to say who started it, but I know who finished it. Mrazek came out, took a slash to Jumbo. Jumbo went right back to the crease. He was below the goal line and just shoved Mrazek over. Again, I just don't know how many superstar players you ever see that from. And that brings me to point number 11. Joe was as talented and as skillful as they get. A skill player, to say the least. But how many times over the years did he drop the gloves with even fellow captains in the league like Jonathan Toews in Chicago, Ryan Getzlaf? I mean, he went after the tough guys in like Tom Wilson. And he also went after Nazem Kadri, who pulled out a handful of his beard in Toronto a couple seasons ago. So I think that's another thing about Joe that you have to just look at. He never backed down. He was such a unique player. I talked about the pass-first mentality. You don't see a lot of superstars like that, but you also don't see a lot of stars who are willing to drop the gloves old school and take care of business like that. All right, point number 12, the captain and then not a captain. And that's an interesting sequence that not only did Joe Thornton go through, but Patrick Marleau was also part of this. It's very interesting in the dynamic of being the de facto leader and the official leader, wearing that C on your chest, and then still being part of the team and asked to be a leader, but not officially the captain anymore, that somebody else would take that role. And I've got to say this, when I was there the day that Joe was officially named captain, it was I take it back. It was right before the season started. The first 2 games that year were the Sharks against Columbus. That was in Stockholm, Sweden. And Todd McClellan just grabbed the group together at the end of the last practice before the season started, said, guys, you probably expected this. Jumbo's our captain. And from there, he went many years. Obviously, there was some turmoil at the end of it. I certainly don't think he ever wanted that taken away. But I think Jumbo also, taught all of us just, again, hanging in there. And yeah, he was probably frustrated with the team, with the situation, probably wanted out in some moments, didn't want to be a part of that anymore, when you're stripped of something like the captaincy. But I think, again, the point I'm trying to make is not how he handled it immediately. It's what he did in all the years after that. Never let it become an issue, never made a stink about it. Like I said, in months and weeks and years following. And I think that's something admirable about that. How many athletes could go through that and continue there and still be a very productive part of the team. Point number 13 here, the Jumbo slide. You remember that one? Right after the Sharks got that series-winning goal at Staples Center back in the early 2010s. And I just feel like that was, of all the celebrations we've seen with Joe over the years, whether it was squirting the water bottle over the glass in St. Louis for that playoff game, or even scoring some milestone goals, and just the looks up at the Jumbotron and the way he started to play to the crowd. And you could really get a sense that Joe, over the years, he embraced the responses that he got from the fans a lot more than when he was a younger player. You could definitely tell he was living up the moment. But to me, that Jumbo slide at Staples Center going right to center ice, yeah, you could feel that. That was a celebration that you could feel. You didn't even have to be there. And I'm glad it was captured so well in photos and on television. All right, I also wanted to talk about him coming originally to San Jose and winning that Hart Trophy. I mean, how absolutely special was that in the 05-06 campaign? And just to put this into perspective, right? Joe started 05 playing 23 games with the Boston Bruins and finishing out his career there. 33 points in 23 games. 24 assists in 23 games. And yeah, he scored 9 goals in those first 23 games. Then he gets traded. So what'd I say? Well over a point per game, 33 points in 23 games. He comes to the Sharks, 92 points in 58 games. Found some instant chemistry with teammates like Jonathan Chichu and never looked back. Won the Hart, won the Art Ross. It's that to me was such a statement to come out west and begin his career with the Sharks like that. Something I don't think any Sharks fan will ever forget. Number 15. How do I even approach this one? The Rooster Trick? You know the story. I really don't care to explain all the details for obvious reasons. Tomas Hertl was being criticized for scoring 4 goals. The last one was between his legs. A couple days later, the Sharks are up in Vancouver. Some teammates are being asked about whether they would do that, whether they think that scoring 4 and getting that last one between the legs is showboating. And Joe made the comment of what he would do if he ever scored 4 goals. I say, thankfully, it didn't happen. I would have loved to have seen it happen in a game, not for the after effect, but he made a promise that a lot of fans are well aware of. I will leave it at that. But yeah, that was part of the lure, part of the allure of Joe Thornton, I guess. The willingness to defend his teammates and really go out there on the edge. All right, point number 16 here. That Stanley Cup final appearance. And covering that one intimately, I have to say, you don't really appreciate it while it's happening because you get so caught up in the moment. A lot of times I wish we could go back to that. I wish Joe could have a second chance. I wish the Sharks could have just the next year gone right back there. But we know that's not how sports works. That's as close as Joe has gotten to lifting the Stanley Cup. And I just want to say this as one of my main points here at the very end. You're not a hockey fan if you don't want Joe Thornton to lift the cup someday. I mean, I'm not going to say that every player deserves the chance. Like, he not only deserves the chance for it again, he deserves to lift it. He absolutely does. All that he's been through, how much he loves this sport, what he's meant for a lot of teammates. Yeah, he deserves that. Point number 17. I talk about what he's been through, so many injuries, literally head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Oh yeah, and fingers too. And elbows, if I didn't mention that. I mean, this guy, I won't share everything. I was privy to stuff over the years of injuries that he was playing through. You would have been surprised. And it's hard, especially whenever he was being criticized, hasn't been as productive as we know him to be. Well, yeah, that's because he's playing with a broken toe. You try it. And I get it. A lot of hockey players do it. But to the level Joe Thornton did, just pretty amazing all that he endured, all that he went through physically that you'll never really have a full knowledge of. Point number 18 is this, and I don't know what this is worth to a lot of people. I know a lot of fans are all about just the end result and the stats. But to me, covering the team for all those years, I was always very well aware of who was the first player at the rink coming back after morning skate for game days. It was always Joe Thornton. And even for practice sessions, whether it was a game day or an off day, Joe Thornton was literally always first on the ice. Always first on the ice. Now, he may have taken some optional days, like all veterans do and should, but Joe Thornton was always the first one out there. And you can interpret that any way you want. The way I look at it is, here I am, a future Hall of Famer, and I still think it's important to be here on time, get the extra time, and put in all the work that you can. Last point here, I'm doing 19 for number 19, and that's a number that's going to hang in the rafters of SAP Center someday. Pretty soon, and I don't know how many years, but in the near relative future, no Shark will ever get to wear number 19 again. And oh yeah, he's also going to be in the Hall of Fame, no doubt. But it's pretty special to think of the legacy of Joe Thornton, and he's been around 15 years. I mean, how old were you 15 years ago? I was 24. Think about life from 24 to 39. You know, I mean, he has encompassed a lot of change. I mean, if you're 30, you were 15 when he came to the Sharks. You were in high school. That longevity, that mark he made on this team is pretty special. Again, I was hoping we would have had a longer time to play it out and to really encapsulate it, but it appears like that's not going to happen. So I want to wish Joe Thornton the very best in Toronto. I hope this season goes well, obviously for every team, staying healthy. but in some way, shape, or form, I'd love to see him lift the cup. Thank you so much, Joe Thornton, for all you did in San Jose.